Listen, straight up, I'm not an RFK fan, but politically, I have to cover if he's rising, and he is rising. Let's play the first clip.
And there you see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at 16%. Inside this poll, a couple of other interesting things. The Biden job approval. If you look at the breakdown, women, voters under 45, Hispanic voters, black voters, where the job approval is overall. The condition of the economy, excellent or good, 33% for Democrats, only fair, poor. And you see the breakdown by party.
So that's one poll that has RFK at 16%. There's others that have him at 20%. Let's play this other clip.
All right, tonight, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not going away. The controversial candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination, and he is polling at 20% in our latest CNN poll. 20% against a sitting Democratic president, Joe Biden. By the way, this is the second poll showing this in a month. Keep in mind, in the 2020 election, Democrats only needed 5% in 4 qualifying polls to participate in debates. Now, Kennedy is not meeting that threshold. He is obviously trouncing it. Kennedy was, of course, once best known for his environmental activism and his family name. But now he's gained a lot of attention, for his anti-vaccine stance, a stance that is supported by some on the right and apparently some maybe on the left. And, of course, his spread of other types of misinformation. So I want to bring in Harry Enton, our numbers expert. Harry, let's just talk about this from the actual number itself. 20% is a big number, okay? And I think what stands out about it is not just that it is big, it is that it is consistent and it is not an outlier.
It's not an outlier, right? So our CNN poll had Kennedy at 20%. We've had 2 Fox polls out in the last month. One had him at 16%. The other one had him at 19%. And so we're seeing this very consistent sort of range of Kennedy, somewhere between 15 and 20%. And all those polls generally have Joe Biden in the low 60s. So Biden is clearly ahead. But the fact is, Kennedy is putting up a far more impressive showing than I would have thought when he first entered the race.
Right. And I guess the real question is, if this is consistent, who are these people? Who is the base for Robert F. Kennedy Jr.?
Yeah, the base can be best described as people who don't self-identify as Democrats, those who self-identify as independents, and those who are not liberal, those who are moderate or conservative. In fact, if you look at our CNN poll and you look at the primary split among moderate or conservative independents, look at that. Biden is ahead, but just by 6 points. Look how close that race is.
So he's basically in polling anywhere from 15 to 20%, which is pretty impressive, and more concerning that Biden, I mean, is basically at 60% for an incumbent Democratic president who they're claiming has done all this historic stuff, which if you watch us, you know, he's done virtually nothing. He's done virtually nothing that he ran on. $15 minimum wage, abandoned that real quick. Public option, abandoned that real quick. Said he wasn't going to drill on public lands. Totally abandoned that. I mean, go down the list. $2,000 checks. He's moving further and further to the right. This debt ceiling bullshit, which he should have said from day one. I'm not negotiating on the debt ceiling. I'll invoke the 14th Amendment because it says in the Constitution our debt should not be in question. If they want to sue and crush the economy, it's on them. That's what he should have done. But with that said, listen, I'm not going to lie here. I don't think RFK is going to become the Democratic nominee for a lot of reasons. We should add Marianne Williamson in these polls is polling anywhere, I'd say, from 7 to 8% to some polls have had her as high as 11 to 12%. That's not nothing. Bernie Sanders, when he started out in 2015, I mean, he was polling at 4 or 5%. There have been fluctuations, too, where RFK dipped back to Marianne, and they were both at 11%. So I wouldn't say, totally forget Marianne Williamson, but I don't think either of them have a great chance at beating Biden, not because Biden's so great, but because you already see what's going on. The DNC has openly said we're rigging it. We will not have debates. We will not have a primary. The media is openly rigging it. I'm not a fan of RFK for reasons I'm going to lay out now. But bottom line, if he's hovering between 15 and 20%, which could go up, he deserves to be on the debate stage. He deserves to be given a primary. I don't want to say given. He deserves to make his case to the American people. Marianne Williamson, based on her polling, belongs on the debate stage also. I don't think she is running the campaign that I think needs to be run, which we could get into. But let's start with RFK. besides the vaccine stuff, which I'll get to, because to me, that's the deal breaker. Besides the vaccine stuff, I think a lot of people are kind of jumping on to RFK just because maybe the vaccine stuff, maybe they look at, oh, he's been good on the environment, which he has been good on the environment for sure. I'll give him that. But it's ironic to me because these are the same people, a lot of these people, I will never vote for another Democrat again. If you even entertain voting for a Democrat, you're a sellout. But RFK jumps in to the Democratic primary. We love RFK. You gotta love their intellectual consistency, right? And I'm not hating on it. I thought it was stupid in the first place. I voted for Jill Stein in 2016. I voted for Green Party before in other races. I'm not a vote blue no matter who person, but I'm also not stupid enough to say I will never vote for someone, even if there's someone that I'm impressed with or I believe in or I think will actually get in there and fight if they have a D next to the name. I think that is stupid. It's pushed by people who know nothing about politics. It's pushed by people that frankly get a lot of clicks off of just being absolutists and nihilists, but don't actually have a plan to seize power. So I'm not saying don't entertain RFK because he's running as a Democrat. I just find it ironic that a lot of these Jimmy Dore types who, burn it down, we will never vote for a Democrat. A lot of his followers and a lot of followers of his mini-me channels that like to suck him off to get clicks, they're on the RFK train. So very interesting. But besides the vaccine stuff, RFK is pretty establishment and has a history of being pretty establishment. So it's weird to me that all of a sudden leftists like RFK, who's not just his last name, but is pretty establishment. Here's a clip from 2009, him criticizing the Obama administration. Let's play it.
And we have this White House up there now that's claiming, we're a White House of values, but to me, it seems that all of the values that they claim to embrace are just these hollow Hollywood facades that mask the one value that they really consider worth fighting for, and that's corporate profit-taking. They say that they like free markets, but they despise free markets. There is no stronger advocate for free market capitalism than myself. The best thing that can happen to the environment is if we had true free market capitalism in this country, because the free market encourages efficiency. And efficiency means the elimination of waste, and pollution is waste. You show me a polluter, I'll show you a subsidy. I'll show you a fat cat using political clout to escape the discipline of the free market and force the public to pay his production costs.
There is no stronger advocate for a free market capitalism than I. Yeah, well, I'm not down with that. I'm not down with that. And if you say, well, Jordan, that was from 2009, he's basically saying the same shit now. Colin, if you have that tweet I sent you too, he's saying we don't have fair market capitalism. We have corporate crony capitalism where the rules are written by billionaires and incumbents and large corporations to stack the deck against the middle class. Government should create rules that make Americans able to do well for themselves by doing good by each other instead of forcing Americans to do well by poisoning each other and hurting each other and privatizing the commons. I believe in as little government as possible, but we need government there to be on the side of the little guy rather than on the side of Wall Street and big corporations. You know what this sounds like to me? Colin, I'd love your thoughts. This sounds a lot to me like Elizabeth Warren with a much more prestigious last name. I'm not a socialist. I'm a capitalist, but I believe in fair capitalism, Elizabeth Warren said. I believe in a true free market. I believe in a regulated market. Where super PACs don't own the country, even though at the last minute I took a super PAC's $14 million, speaking as Elizabeth Warren. But RFK
I'm a capitalist
is
to my bones.
Right. That's what Elizabeth Warren said. Block is right twice a day. Michael Tracy had a good tweet thread. He pointed out, has anyone ever endorsed Hillary Clinton more consecutive times than RFK Jr.? So I think this is him endorsing Hillary Clinton Senate campaign. So that would be in 2000.
New Yorkers come from everywhere. The best people from all over the country in every walk of life gravitate towards New York. We've produced the leaders that have articulated a vision for America of a community of all kinds of different people who go together because we share a value. It is against everything we stand for as a state to say that you can't participate in public life in this state because you weren't born here. We should be proud in our state that we've gotten somebody of the quality and the timber and the character of Hillary Clinton.
This is 2008. He was on the campaign trail for Hillary Clinton for her first presidential campaign. Plans to stump for Hillary in New Jersey. And then again in 2016. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's a crime if somebody supported Hillary Clinton, but I don't know many true leftists who would consider that person anti-establishment, anti-war. Yeah, I don't know about that. You know, it's like Ron DeSantis kind of like reinventing his COVID policy, because Ron DeSantis was for the vaccine in the beginning. Then when he thought it was politically expedient, then he was anti-vaccine. But I mean, Trump will attack him. He was pro-vaccine, Ron DeSantis in the beginning. But look at this tweet, because it sounds like RFK was pro-lockdown in the beginning. Anyway, looking forward to the evidence of RFK's brave opposition to lockdowns in March, April, May of 2020. You know, when the stay-at-home orders were actually still in effect. And Michael Tracy is referencing this tweet by RFK, March 30th, 2020. Coronavirus lockdown hasn't just slowed COVID-19, it reduced lethal air pollution and associated mortality. When lockdown lifts, risks of status quo will return and could worsen as governments weaken environmental regulations and pour billions into polluting industries. I don't know. That sounds pretty pro-lockdown to me. And by the way, I'm not knocking him for it. I actually think in the beginning, the world should have had a lockdown. It would have actually slowed COVID when we could have actually slowed and maybe even killed it. Unfortunately, because of America and many other reasons, we couldn't coordinate a global response to COVID. But yeah, it would have had to been paid. American government, which I don't believe they would have had to pay people to stay home, not through checks or unemployment, literally just backstop the payrolls like Europe did. Just the government pays the payrolls, stay home, watch Netflix. Netflix is free for a month, whatever. That could have actually stopped COVID in its tracks if we kept people away from each other, aside from obviously people who have to be in the hospitals and, you know, crucial services like that. Sounds to me like he was for the lockdown. Well, Jordan, devil's advocate. Well, Jordan, he wised up. He wised up eventually, and then he was anti-lockdown. Okay, if you buy that, then you believe he's seen the light, and now is anti-war after supporting Hillary Clinton 3 times. Again, you can evolve, but I don't understand these people who are like anointing this man as like the COVID czar. He was right about everything. And he is anti-big pharma and anti-lockdown and anti-mandate. I mean, he's basically saying once China lifts his lockdown, everything's going to go to hell. Sounds to me like he's just a slippery politician changing his tune as we go. And again, broken clock twice a day. This is a tweet thread by Michael Tracy. But let's just show. This is a tweet from RFK, February 16th, 2018. Remember the conservatives' investigator zeal when Joe McCarthy claimed there were a few Russian sympathizers in the State Department compromising our democracy? Whatever happened to those conservatives? What would Joe McCarthy do? Let me repeat. Remember the conservatives' investigator zeal when Joe McCarthy claimed there were a few Russian sympathizers in the State Department compromising our democracy? Whatever happened to those conservatives? WWJMD. What would Joe McCarthy do? Oh boy. Invoking what would good old Joe do? I mean, I wish I was making this stuff up. He also linked to Russian operation hacked a Vermont utility, showing risk to U.S. electrical grid security. So this was that bullshit Washington Post story a few years ago that Russia hacked Vermont's electricity grid. I was consistent from day one, by the way, even when I was at TYT. I said Russiagate was bullshit. I said there was never any evidence that Trump's campaign colluded with the Russian government. I said Trump's campaign couldn't collude with a ham sandwich, much less a hostile foreign nuclear power. But it's interesting that RFK, on one hand, is telling all his followers, don't believe the government, don't believe the science, don't believe this, don't believe this. Yet he just breathlessly believes whatever bullshit the CIA fed them about Russia hacking Vermont's electricity grid. This was the same. Oh, my God. He's basically tweeting out what Rachel Maddow had her hair on fire and MSNBC had their hair on fire and everybody was having a meltdown over at MSNBC and the Washington Post and CNN, the whole Russiagate industrial complex. The bottom line is, even before getting to the anti-vax stuff, this guy, I think, is pretending to be anti-establishment. He's not for Medicare for all. I don't even know if he would push a public option. He's not, as far as I could tell, he's not for massively cutting the military. I haven't heard him put a number that he would push to cut. I think he's good on the environment, which would be better than what we have now, but I don't really think he has a game-changing proposal here. He's not doing anything about money in politics. And Chief, most importantly, and I don't really care who cancels me, and if some of you don't agree, to me, it's a non-starter when you forget the COVID vaccine, which a lot of people, had questions about. I don't really have a problem per se with people wanting to take a little longer to get the COVID vaccine, or if you decided not to get it for yourself, obviously, you should have the choice. But this person, long before COVID, is an anti-vaxxer across the board, has pushed rank propaganda that has been debunked time after time after time about COVID. About vaccines, linking to autism, that it causes autism. His stuff, vaccines will give you mercury poisoning. It's been debunked time and time and time again, totally separate from the COVID vaccine. So if you are basically anti-vax across the board, which, by the way, his foundation is making a shit ton of money. You should look at some of the reporting about his Children's Defense Fund? I think that's what it's called. The amount of money they have made in the age of COVID from donations. No. And you could be more than one thing at a time. You could be good on the environment and batshit on other things. You could be good on the environment and kind of a phony on other things. I think he's good on the environment and batshit on science. I think he's good on the environment and kind of just a politician on everything else. I don't buy his anti-crony capitalism shtick. I don't really think he would do dramatically different than a standard Democrat. He is a Kennedy, so I'm not saying you are what your family is, but he comes from privilege and wealth. So somebody asked, who am I supporting? To tell you the truth, I mean, if you put a gun to my head, if I had to vote in the Democratic primary, personally, you do whatever you want. I'm not telling people who to vote for. You put a gun to my head, I would vote for Marianne Williamson. Frankly, I wish there were other options. I think it's wide open. I think other people could jump in. But between Biden, Marianne Williamson, and RFK, I mean, that's not even a close call to me. I would vote for Marianne Williamson. I don't think she's perfect. There's things I don't like. Frankly, I don't think she's running the best campaign. I think she's basically doing what Bernie did, which is putting out what she would do in an aspirational way, trying to run a positive campaign. But she, like Bernie, refuses to punch Biden in the face. She's had opportunities to really go after Biden. And from what I could tell, and from speaking with people on her campaign, she's not interested in aggressively going after Biden on his failures as a president, his abandoning the few campaign promises he made, his rank lies about his civil rights record, his corruption. I said it for Bernie, and I would say it for Marianne, and I would say it for RFK. If you're not willing to aggressively go after Biden for the corruption, aggressively go after Biden for not being what we were fed, not being somebody who could get Republicans to work with him, not being a guy who get things done, abandoning a $15 minimum wage, abandoning a public option, increasing drilling on public land rather than banning it. If you're not willing to actually run against the president aggressively, which would get you coverage because the media will cover conflict, then what are you doing? It's great. Be positive, run a positive campaign, be aspirational. I thought her speech, I didn't see the whole thing, but her new economic Bill of Rights speech is good. But when she's had opportunity to go aggressively against Biden, she doesn't do it. Well, why do we need Bernie different gender then? I hate to be crass, but Bernie would only go so far. And from what I could tell, I'm not saying she doesn't have this skill. I'm not saying she couldn't aggressively go after him, but so far she hasn't. I don't know who's advising her or if she just thinks she'd be better off not aggressively going after Biden. I think Biden is a weak. I thought he was weak in 2020 and could have been beaten. I think he's weaker now. And I think it's the candidate who is willing to borrow a little bit from Donald Trump, not the racism, not the bigotry, not the sexism, not the Islamophobia, but the actual rough talk and talking the talk. I think that candidate is going to rise. I don't think RFK ultimately is going to win the nomination. He might go higher in the polls. I think the DNC might be forced to hold a debate if either of Marianne or RFK, get towards like 25%, because I think it would hurt them in the general. And I think a lot of people would basically say, fuck these people. We're not going to vote in the general because they refuse to hold a primary. So I think that's possible too.